Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing the language tag because I haven't done that one yet. I don't really know who created this tag, but if I do find out, I'll put that channel in the description down below. These are just 10 questions that have to do with what kind of language learner you are, so let's get started. The first question is, what is your native language? And that's a really simple answer. It's Dutch. I live in the Netherlands. I've lived here my whole life. My whole family is Dutch. So yeah, that's all there is to it. Question 2 is, what was your first language learning experience? And I think that was just learning English in elementary school, I guess. I think we were around 9 when we started learning English, but in elementary school it was very basic. I think we just learned like prepositions and like I could count to 10 and I could say hello, but I think that was about it. There are also these magazines that you could subscribe to through school, and there was this one magazine I really wanted a subscription to, but my parents wanted something a little bit more educational, so they gave me a subscription to a magazine called Hello You, and that was a magazine that was like partially in Dutch, partially in English, but I hated it. My English just really wasn't good enough to really understand it, so sometimes I would read like some of the Dutch parts, but I never really tried to read the English parts because it was just too difficult with my limited knowledge of English, so I really didn't enjoy it, and because of that I actually didn't really enjoy English at all. But I guess they turned out alright because I'm now studying English, so not quite a childhood trauma. The next question is, what languages have you studied and why did you start them? I started learning English, French and German all because those were required subjects in school. I had to take French and German for the first 3 years of secondary school, and after that I could choose which one I wanted to continue, and I chose French. English was required for all 6 years of secondary school and also I think the last 2 years of elementary school, but we didn't really learn much there. I briefly took a couple of Mandarin classes in secondary school. That was just an elective, but it was a bit much on top of all of my other classes, so after a few lessons I think I already dropped it, maybe like 6 or 7 lessons or so I didn't really learn that much. The only thing I could really remember was the character 4, which is the same in Japanese, so when I started learning Japanese I recognised it, but that's really all, and I can say hello, that's all I think. Yeah, I think the reason they wanted to start learning Mandarin was because, I don't know, I think we had already been to China or we were going on a trip to China, but I think we'd already been at that point, and also it was like the first language I kind of came in contact with through school that was like a bit more exotic, I guess, because I didn't really know anyone else that studied Chinese, so that made it a little bit more interesting, I guess. Swedish was really the first language that I started learning on my own because we went on a trip to Sweden and I saw the language around me and I heard it and I realised that there were lots of similarities with Dutch, English and German, so that actually might not be too difficult a language to learn. So yeah, and I thought it just really sounded beautiful and I really loved Sweden, so I think with Swedish also my love for the country really helped cultivate an interest in the language as well. I guess the next language that I've sort of started learning was Spanish, and I learned a little bit at home before I went to Argentina, but it wasn't really that much. I could just introduce myself and that's all, I think. But then in Argentina I took 2 weeks of private lessons and I learned quite a bit, but when I got back I didn't really keep it up, so I don't really remember a lot of Spanish. Like, it's my passive knowledge of it is quite alright. I guess I can still read quite a bit, but there's very little I can say in Spanish, and it's a bit of a shame since I actually took lessons for it that I forgot so much. But yeah, I don't know, like I want to get back into it at some point, but it's just not really my highest priority. I think, like, rather than improving my Spanish I would rather improve my French and Italian. Speaking of Italian, that was a language that I started learning last summer because we went to Italy. I only planned on learning a little bit so that I could just use it during my trip, but I actually realised I quite liked the language, so I continued it afterwards. 2 years ago I started learning Japanese, also because of a trip. We went to Japan and I wanted to be able to understand some of the written things around me, and I wanted to be able to say some basic phrases, I guess, and I was actually able to, so that was really cool. With Japanese culture was also a huge influence on me wanting to learn the language. I think I don't know, for quite a few years I've been really interested in Japan, not necessarily like anime or anything, that's more I'm getting interested in, because I really know I actually went to an open day of a university to maybe study Japanese, and I realised like 90% of the people there were like super into anime, and I was like the only one that didn't really watch it, I felt like. But now I'm actually getting into it. I think those are all the languages that I've studied a bit more extensively, because there's also just some languages that I've dabbled in a little bit, or just started learning it but haven't really continued, like Danish for example. Every now and then I continue Danish on Duolingo, but I always try not to go too far into the tree, because like I'm also learning Swedish, and for a really long time I was really worried I would start mixing up Swedish and Danish, but I feel like at this point I know Swedish quite well enough to like keep them separate at least. But I don't know, I'm still kind of like trying to only learn some basic Danish and not make it too complicated. Irish I started at the beginning of this year because of a trip to Dublin, and I just wanted to be able to like understand some things during my trip, but I only like started an online course of like only 2 weeks and I didn't even finish it, so I learned very little actually, and it was a quite difficult language, especially like the pronunciation, and it didn't really look like anything I already knew. I think the only thing I can really remember from it is like Dia Gwit, which is like hello or something, but I don't even know if I pronounced that correctly. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna get back to Irish, honestly. I do have 2 books in Irish which I would like to be able to read, so that's like my only goal maybe, but apart from that, I don't know, Irish isn't exactly my favourite language. I don't know. Then there is Russian, which I recently started. I don't really know lots of Russian yet, but I enjoy learning it, especially because it's yet again a different alphabet, so I always think that's really cool. And yeah, I think Russian sounds quite cool, so I'm excited for it. And also I've been to Russia before, so I think that also makes it interesting. But right now I'm learning it because I would feel like in certain countries it would be like a good second language to learn. The last language that I've dabbled in is Frisian, which is a language that's spoken in the north of the Netherlands, and it's quite similar to Dutch, and that's what also kind of makes it difficult for me. I don't know, I feel with certain words I can't really tell if I should pronounce them in the Dutch way or not, so it's a bit of a confusing language honestly, even though I feel like it should be so easy. But I started this because I just think it's cool that there's a different language spoken in this part of the country and I want to be able to speak it. And there's also, so I have like one grammar that came from there, so I think it's cool to kind of learn the language because of that. But right now it's not really a priority. I'm sure at some point I'll continue, but right now I just have other languages I really want to focus on. Question 4. How does your personality affect how you learn languages? I'm quite an introvert, so that's definitely something that affects how I learn languages. I think I'm not really someone that easily goes up to other people when I hear them speaking my target language and just randomly strikes up a conversation. So I don't very often have conversations in my target languages, just randomly at least. I do, like whenever I'm abroad and I want to ask people something and I would also ask them in English, then I do try to ask it in my target language, but I don't really just randomly strike up a conversation because that's in general not something I do very often. I guess something else that really affects my language learning, I think it's just that I'm a person that's really interested in a lot of different things, but because of that I am also interested in a lot of different languages, and I sometimes have a bit of trouble like sticking to one language. And On the one hand, I don't know, I might progress much faster if I would stick to one language and then continue to another language if I've mastered the first one, but honestly I'm just really enjoying learning all these different languages and I don't really care that it's going much slower because of it. The next question is, do you prefer learning languages in a class or individually? And that's definitely individually, because I don't know, in general I just find it really nice to work out things on my own and to I feel much more like I'm accomplishing something when I do it on my own. I don't know if that sounds weird, but yeah, and also I just feel like I learn much faster on my own because I can really focus on the things that work for me, and I can also make it more fun, because whenever you're taking a class the teacher will assign you things to do, but when I learn languages on my own I can really just decide what I feel like doing on a daily basis, and I like that because for some languages I would actually really like to get to a higher level, but with other languages I just enjoy the process of language learning so much that I don't really care how much I learn. I think that's the case with Japanese. Like, definitely at some point I would like to be fluent in Japanese, but I don't really care that it's going quite slow. I'm just enjoying the process. I feel like those two things are kind of contradictory, because I'm saying that I can go at my own pace and also going faster but also go slower, but I don't know, I think that's just the point. I can go at my own pace basically. Question 6 is, what are your favourite language learning materials? I know not everyone really likes studying grammar and all that, but I really enjoy just plain workbooks for languages, like textbook workbooks, that kind of stuff. For my favourite one currently is the Japanese from Zero series. I really enjoy it. It's very accessible and it makes it feel like Japanese actually isn't too complicated a language to learn, so I'm really enjoying that one. And I'm also a huge fan of Duolingo. I know not everyone really likes it because I feel like it doesn't teach you that much, but that's not really what I expect from Duolingo. It's just for me a way to practice a language a little bit each day when I don't really have enough time to actually study a language very extensively. And it's also a way for me to kind of get interested in a language, because last summer with Italian I wasn't actually planning on buying a textbook, but I started Italian on Duolingo just to learn a bit for my trip, and then I realised that I actually really liked Italian, so that's how I ended up buying a textbook anyway. So it's just kind of sort of a way for me to try out if I like the language. The next question is, how much time do you spend daily or weekly actively learning a language? And that really differs throughout the year. When I'm in university it's really not that much. I think it's on average maybe just 10 minutes a day or something, because I'm mostly doing Duolingo, or I'll watch a video in one of my target languages, or I'll listen to a short podcast. So I don't actually work much in my textbook during that time, but now that I have a holiday I'm spending much more time each day. I don't know, maybe it's still not that much because I've been doing lots of other things for the last week and a half, but I am planning on doing a bit more. I think the last week and a half it's been maybe half an hour a day, but I'd like to be a bit more. Question 8. What are your short and long-term goals? I recently made a video for my summer language learning goals, so those are my short-term goals I guess. And for long-term goals, I don't know, it's easy to say that I want to be fluent in every language, but that's obviously not realistically possible. But I think Swedish is my highest priority, and that's definitely a language that I would like to be fluent in. For the other languages I just want to be at least conversational I guess, and just to be able to read. I don't have to be reading academic texts, but just books I would also enjoy reading in my native language, like fantasy books or young adult books. I also like to be able to read those in other languages. And yeah, some languages are a bit higher priority than others I think. So Swedish is highest priority, and then I would like to be conversational in French, German and Japanese I guess. And Russian would also be really cool. And Italian, I have a few Italian friends, so I think it would just be nice to be able to have a conversation with them in Italian, but I don't necessarily need to be fluent in the language. Same goes for Spanish I guess. I would like to be able to be conversational in it because I think it's really useful for travelling, but I don't necessarily have to be fluent in it. Question 9. What is your favourite language? I think you already get that a bit from my videos maybe, but Swedish and Japanese are probably my favourite languages because they just sound beautifully, and also I really like the way Japanese looks, and I think it's really cool when you're learning, like at first you don't know any characters and it's just a bunch of characters to you. You don't realise that it actually is a text and it actually means something, but slowly you learn more characters and it's really cool to like slowly realise what this bunch of characters are actually saying. I don't know, it feels a bit like a puzzle, I guess, and that's what I really enjoy about learning Japanese. So that's really 4 languages I know a bit better. I also think Russian sounds quite nice, and when it comes to the way a language looks, I really like Korean because like the characters are just really aesthetically pleasing, and that's pretty much the sole reason that at some point I'd like to learn Korean as well. Also, I think what I like about the way Swedish sounds is that it's so sing-songy, it sounds so happy, and I can't really imagine someone sounding really angry in Swedish. I don't know. The last question is, what advice can you give to new language learners? And that would probably be to try to combine your language learning with some of your other interests. Like I, for example, really enjoy reading, so I try to find books that I always want to read anyway that are written in my target languages. So I don't know, because then I'm not just learning a language while reading the book, but I'm actually reading a story that I'm really enjoying. And I also try to do that with like TV shows and movies in my target languages, just really try to find things that I actually enjoy. And I also do this on Instagram. I follow accounts that post things that I find interesting anyway, but though they post in my target language. So that's a really casual way to be exposed to language, I guess, because every time I open up Instagram on my feed, I'll see a picture of them and it'll just say in a few lines something in my target language, and that's really cool because I don't actually have to be thinking like, oh, I should study today. I would probably open up Instagram anyway, and then it's just there and I see it anyway. Something else to bear in mind is just that everyone learns in a different way. What works for someone else might not work for you, so don't really get discouraged. Just try to find something else that works for you personally. Those were the questions of the language tag. I'm going to tag Irish from the channel Blue Irish to do this, but also if you haven't done this tag yet and you really want to, definitely go ahead and do it because that's what I did. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!